Any thoughts they want to express after yesterday, or anything on your mind that you want to share with everyone?
I would like to say that I really appreciated the graphics, the PowerPoint that was presented yesterday afternoon. I'm one of those people where I need to see it in different, more. But my concern about what I saw yesterday was that most of our regulations have a weight of 6. And in my personal opinion, I feel that it might be detrimental to people doing direct care.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
At some point today, could we take just like 2 minutes and review the rules about who's allowed to sit at what tables?
I think this time would be a good time to do that. Do you have a specific question, or should we go around? Each team can choose to have people that are not voting members sit at their tables or sit in the public comment area. It's their choice. Team's choice. Since there are some people who joined today, most people from yesterday, let's just go on quickly and say what your name is, and you can tell it for the table if you're a voting member. I guess if you're not a voting member, you can just say that, because we know most people are voting members. Do you mind if we do this first before your comment, or?
Yeah, no.
Okay. Let's just go around quickly then. We start over here, so maybe we'll start here at Centers this time instead. You say your name. If you're not a voting member, then you can say that you're not.
Rachel Atchison. Deeter Miller. Hillary Prentice.
Nicole Sohn.
Jess Harvey, not a voting member.
Licensing.
I'm Candy.
Jessica.
Lysion.
Brenda Martinez.
Travis Hansen.
Judy Bunkelman.
Debbie Groff.
Yvonne Lewis.
Karen Christensen.
Eva Freemuth.
Thanks, licensing team. Parents.
Charisse.
Kelsey Garcia. Victoria Hill, voting member.
Kevin Rutherford.
The great and powerful Oz. I'm Christiana, voting member.
Tiffany, I'm not a voting member.
Thanks, parents. Head Start ECAP.
Allison.
Vanessa.
Yolanda.
Susanna.
Marcy. Misha.
Pam. Katie.
Thank you, Head Start ECAP. Family Home Providers.
Marie.
Holly.
The other Tyler, interloper.
Carol.
Kathy.
Tracy.
Chris.
Mary.
Guadalupe.
Kat.
All right, great. Thanks for you new people who joined today. We're happy to see you all. And if any other people join, please let us know. But yes, again, to clarify, each team can decide who sits with them, but voting members are the only people who can, of course, measure consensus. All right, anyone else? Oh, Candy, I'm sorry. You wanted to speak.
Yeah, yesterday we were voting on, I don't remember the specific whack. Hillary, maybe you remember the specific whack that had to do with the requirements for the 30 hours of ongoing training with the leadership piece in it, and they wanted to remove it for the assistant teachers and the lead teachers, and I voted a 2. I had a conversation this morning, and anyway, I'd like to change my vote to a 3 so we can move on to a full consensus.
Woo! Great way to start the morning. Okay, so that's on 107. Thank you, Candy. We'll keep note of that. Do you want to talk about what encouraged your change from 2 to a 3 at all?
I had a conversation with a provider who has more information about what type of leadership classes are out there and whether those are really effective in the way I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking at this point they're not, so there's no reason to not support that.
Okay, great. I'm glad that that came out of a conversation. Anyone else want to share? Okay. In that case, at any point in this intro time that we have set aside, you can always raise your hand and share any other thoughts or concerns or reflections. But we'll go ahead and do a quick recap of where your progress is. We'll give you another chance to ask any questions of anyone from our interview quote-unquote panel yesterday. So Debbie on the crosswalk, Sonia on the final review, or Hallie on the weight balancing. And then we'll have a discussion on the final plan moving forward. Yes, a question over here in Family Home.
I really like the protocol change, how we're going to not concentrate on the WAC and just concentrate on the language. Or, yeah, not on the weight, but just on the language, because, you know, we have put off all these really hard topics till the end, and now we're at the end, and it's taking us a long time to get through this short list. And we still have a lot to do in this very short time. So I think we need to be diligent and thoughtful and prepared, and everybody stay on task to get through this, or we're not going to get through it.
Thank you. It's a great transition. We'll just take a quick look at where we are and what time looks like. So as you know, Laura, you could advance. As you know, we're now at 2.5 days left, right? We have all of today, half of tomorrow, and then a short day Saturday from 10 to 5:30 next month, and then 8:30 to 12 on Sunday. So if you add that all up, that's 2.5 days left of all of NRM. So if we break it down, yesterday, you all reached full consensus on one section. Of course, that was a very hard section, so that was really exciting that you got through that. You reached partial consensus on 3 sections, and then we actually added an additional section, 0461. So your average pace is about 1 hour per section. Typically, on the fast side, it's been 4. When you are moving quickly, it's 4 sections per hour. Your average is about 2.5 sections per hour over time, so across all of NRM up to today. So that's just an update, just to see where you are. Again, we know that 0-100 was tough, but we also know, as you just mentioned, that the rest of this list is actually really tough as well, and you specifically left them to the end. Okay, so Lori's pointing out that with CAT's change, we could actually change that number to 2 sections that reached full consensus. Candy, yes. Thank you. Okay, so this is how we look for the remaining time. Again, 2.5 days left, knowing that we have other items to do outside of reaching full consensus. So we have 17 in queue for consensus. If you go at the 2.5 sections per hour rate, you would need 7 total hours. So that's at the fast end, right? The fast end, you always do 2.5. So you need 7 hours to do that. 6 are in queue for TA resolution. 3 of those were tabled, so those are high priority, difficult conversations. We don't know how long that'll take you, right? 3 are partial from yesterday, and if we bring that back, we think that'll take about an hour and a half. Starting right now, once we start consensus this morning, we'll have 15 hours remaining for the rest of NRM. So for February and March, we'll only have 15 hours remaining. So it's doable, but hopefully the numbers can help you kind of get a sense of exactly where we fall. Again, this is at the fast rate at 2.5 sections per hour. Okay. So our current status, we just updated this table and the thermometer, so it still looks pretty good, but still a lot of hard work to do before we get to March, really. So what's important, if we go to the next slide, is to remind you what we said we wanted to do in March. So aside from the time we have left that we want to reach full consensus, we also want to give a chance to do a full review of the flag items. So between now and March, you all wanted to get a chance to review all, bring back any items that are really important to you that need to come back to the table. We also need to go over anything in definitions that you feel like need to be discussed as a whole. We also, at that time, could do a duplicate crosswalk update, and at that time could also give updates on weight balancing review. So as you can see, the March agenda is already pretty full. So when I say there's 15 hours left, we want to reserve some of that time in March to do these items and not just full consensus taking, right, ideally. Okay, so to recap, and Eva put this really nicely at the end of the day yesterday, our options are really negotiate language only, hopefully finish, or option 2, continue to negotiate language and weights, that's supposed to say and weights, and potentially not finish.
Actually, the way you have it set is probably right.
Okay, do you all need yes centers?
We would like an option 3, which is have the section, we would like to propose an option 3, where you have the section with the weight on the screen. If it's not a huge contentious, like 7 or 8 kind of a weight, we agree around the room quickly, okay, let's just focus on the language for speed, to make sure we get through the language. If there is a weight that is a 7 or 8 and we want to make sure that we're being intentional about those, then we would include the weight, but be very selective when we're discussing weights. Well, yeah, I mean, we don't want to say, hey, we're not doing weights at all, because that might not be appropriate. So we're thinking on a very limited case-by-case basis, that might be good.
Did I capture option 3 correctly on the screen?
Yeah.
Negotiate language only and discuss weights on select sections.
Yes.
And then I would also say that there may be cases in which we would want to flag something for Dell to look at whether or not it's a duplicate.
Yes, I think that's consistently going to be on our list that we want to flag. Thank you, Katie. Okay, do you all need Team Caucus at all to make a decision? Okay, let's do a 2-minute Team Caucus to discuss these 3 options, and then we'll come together. Well, okay, 2-minute Team Caucus on the clock. How's everyone doing? Do you need more time? You good? Okay, let's hear from the groups. Who wants to go first on their decision? Centers choose 3 since they proposed it. Got it. Licensing team?
Licensing would choose 1, we can live with 3.
Okay. Parents? Okay. Head Start ECAP? 3 or 1 are okay with Head Start ECAP. Family home?
Family homes are dominant 3 with a close second of 1.
Okay. Thank you. Sure. Okay. Parents, are you ready? Correct. So the question was, this does not affect TA resolution. This is just for the main room queue. Okay, so parents choose 1. Lori has a clarifying.
We want to clarify something about the weights and the rules that will be filed out just when this negotiation is done. So when the decision was made to postpone implementation of the weights until after the validation study, this means that when we file the proposals in a couple of months after you all are done, the weight will not be in the rule. And Hillary, you asked the question yesterday, and I think we got kind of a confusing answer for you. There will be just language in the rule, and that will be the only thing that's out there for comment. The weight will not be included at that time. The rules will be adopted, and they will be piloted in that interim period before we come back and look at the weights again after the validation study. At that time, you'll be negotiating the weights, and then the rules will be amended to include those weights.
The question was, who will negotiate the weights when we when we finalize those and publish them to go into effect down the road? And I think that answer is open-ended at this point. It's another group of stakeholders. We haven't identified anyone specifically. So the timeline is what's kind of confusing, I think, because we did have to change the timeline in the middle of this process, given the feedback and given a couple of other circumstances, one of which being that we're becoming a new agency, one of which being that we wanted to have this prolonged validation period. So we just wanted to try and clarify the filing process going forward and why there was confusion yesterday. So Lori's point was that Hillary asked a question and said, these rules will be filed. Sorry, it's a great question. Somebody asked a question. Anyway, there was a question that said, what do we do with the weights? Is all of our work with the weights useless? And the answer is no, it's not useless because it informs our validation process, and we're going to honor all of the weights that we've already reached consensus on, because that's going to guide our work moving forward. Now, our work moving forward spans a number of years. The first step is this May, we're going to file this chapter with this language that we've all worked on, but just the language. The weights will not be in that filing. The enforcement sections will not be in that filing because those have been postponed. Because we want to first validate the weights over 2.5 years. So when we file in May, we're gonna still encourage public comment on the language and on the weights, because we all know weights are coming down the road, even though they won't technically be in that filing at that time. Now, After that, fast forward to about a year, August of 2019, this language will become enforceable. It will go into effect. The weights will still not be in that language and will still not go into effect until the following year, August 2020. Now, sometime right before August 2020 is when we will do our second filing that will put the weights in the language and will put the enforcement sections in the language. And when that happens, that's when this other round of negotiations and public comment hearing, well, let me say this other round of public comments will be open again to discuss weights. And because that's not going to happen until the fall of 2020, that's why we don't know exactly who will be involved in that process. But it'll be like this with more stakeholders. So we have a bunch of questions. I saw Hillary's first.
In that, so it seems to me that if you are publishing the WAC language without the weights and asking for public commentary, that is potentially a little bit misleading, because some of the language is fine if the weight is reasonable and not fine if the weight is high. And I think it would be misleading to the public to not share that information, even if you're not enforcing on it initially, but to say this is the scale of risk that has been assessed to this.
I think that's a valid comment. All of this information is public, and we are pumping out information and communication about the weighted system and about the enforcement and about the rulemaking process. And I understand that that may be a little misleading, but it's still, you gotta get content, you gotta get public comment on the wording, and then later we gotta get public comment on the weights. And I think in the later public comments might be a better time to associate the wording with the weights, since that's when they're gonna go into effect.
Hi, I would like clarification again on this timeline. You said August 2019, that these are gonna start being enforced language only. Okay, and August 2020, then the weights are going to be connected to that language? And so the second filing is gonna be after that August 2020, or at the same time as that August 2020?
I think it's hard to predict now exactly when that second filing will be, because the rules will be enforced starting in August of 2019. Aside from that, or parallel to that, you've got this validation study that's been happening. And after that validation study is over, there will be a group of stakeholders that's convened to look at the results of that validation study. And at that point, it's DCYF that's doing this work. DCYF has the same requirement to negotiate that Dell has had. And that validation study will result in you guys being, well, not you guys, but a group of stakeholders negotiating the weights at that time. And then the proposed rules with weights will be filed after that work is done, looking at the validation study and negotiating the weights.
So I'm going to clarify again. So that means implementation of the language with the weights will be enforced in August of 2020, and somewhere around that same time, there's also going to be public comment on those regulations that are already being enforced.
So in August 19, we start enforcing the rules with just the language.
Right.
There will be no weight. Yeah. Thank you.
So first of all, I really agree with Hillary. I do think that that's a real problem, that we have agreed to some language because of it being a 1 or a 3 or whatever. So that communication has to be a lot stronger, I think. And then the other thing is that I would like to request that sometime today, back in the back room, you guys work on having a handout that has this schedule on it, so that we can actually see when these public comment periods are, when everything is going into effect. Now that we've really complicated this, when each thing goes into effect, that would be helpful.
Sure, we can give you a rough idea of what we think it's going to be. You have to realize that we don't know who's going to have these jobs.
You can write a
in
giant
DCYF.
draft over the whole
Yes,
thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So, any more questions? Have we totally confused you? We wanted to clarify because we want to make sure that you all use your time, these remaining 15 hours, in the best possible way. And 14 and a half, thank you, Kathy. We know that down the road, you're all going to be negotiating these weights. And it will be a much more informed negotiation because you'll have that validation study. So you really need to think about, do you want to spend your time now negotiating weights?
Thank you, Lori and Tyler. So I think it was really helpful in framing how you all use your remaining time, because we are almost up on time. I hear that basically everyone wants to go with option 1. And if there is anything that comes up as a very high priority section, groups, I think everyone agreed that groups can say that they have a strong feeling about the weights. Does anyone disagree with what I just summarized for our remaining time, our short remaining time left? Okay. So now I'd like to ask if you're ready to send a TA resolution group out. They're going to start with the first item on the queue for your TA resolution. We're actually going to combine the first two, which is safe sleep and supervision. 270 and 291. Yes, I think.
If we're going to send a TA group out, could I please share a little information prior to?
Okay, let's give everyone a minute of a team caucus to decide if they're ready to send people out now, or if we want to get moving first and then send people out. So 1 minute on the clock. So I'm hearing some groups who already think yes, they want to go forward, picking their folks. So if your answer is yes, start thinking about who you'll send out. our team's ready to make their decision. Yes? See some, yes? Okay. I think I'm gathering that everyone wants to go ahead and send TA resolution.
Right, well, so the filing.
Anyone, okay. So why don't we go ahead and send those folks out, and Zane's right here, he'll escort the people who are going, because it's upstairs. Oh yes, licensing.
I do need to.
Yes, oh, I'm sorry, you wanted to share some information before we go.
Yes. It's,
All right, sorry everyone, if we could come back together.
what I wanted to share is that part of whenever there is a death or a near death in childcare, the department has something called a fatality review that happens after that. And that is conducted by members of the community. It is not conducted by the people that were involved with that provider or that child. After that committee, they meet and they come forth with a bunch of, whatever their recommendations are that might have made a difference or that are things that we've learned from. And they send them forth then to the Dell leadership team for consideration on whether or not changes should be made to the department. We recently had a quality committee meeting, and we were reviewing the recommendations from 3 child deaths that happened some time ago. Out of those, 3 things came out that really could affect this group that I wanted to share with you. And one is that for safe sleep, they recommended that there be a definition that the infant be checked often, not to exceed 15 minutes. And that was, the not to exceed was the piece that was added in that is not in our current language. They also recommended that there be a safe sleep poster, like our hand washing poster. Now at the committee, they all knew we don't have such an animal at the moment, so it would have to be developed. But that was the second one. And the third one, which is actually not part of the safe sleep piece, had to do with that every room that is being used for childcare have the address of the facility posted, because in a panic, they had a provider of care that couldn't think. She just couldn't get the address out. So those are the 3 things that could impact the negotiations that we're involved now, and I wanted to share that information with the whole group so you know where that's coming from. And the second piece of that is the Dell team has drafted some alternate supervision definition language that Debbie's going to bring into the small group that we also think will impact both safe sleep, overnight care, and supervision when we get to it. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Just wanted to know, are those studies done when children in licensed care die? So not children in not licensed care?
No, this is licensed childcare. And it's not even saying that that things weren't done right. It really is saying, what did we learn from this that might be beneficial to children in the future? I think that's the important piece here. It isn't about laying blame or looking for fault. It really is, what could we do differently to try and assist in these situations in the future?
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Yes, Marie?
We appreciate that information so much. I think that will be helpful to use as a guide. We also have some information that we would like to share based on our research. We know that in Washington State, there are 4.8 infant deaths per 1,000 children, and in childcare, that number is much less. So we're encouraged by the work that's already been done and that we continue to do to reduce this. In addition, we wanted to review the hospital requirements for supervision of children when they are in the hospital, and the requirements are far less than what are proposed in our WAC. We also have a really big concern, and if you have any information to share with the whole group, on overnight care requiring somebody to be awake. We know that 99.9% of overnight care in licensed facilities happens in family homes, and the ability to have a staff person there awake all night, and the ability of Dell to then check on that is very, very demanding and would be difficult. So we need rationale for the idea that active supervision would be required while children are sleeping overnight.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to put 3 minutes of the clock for you all to have a quick team caucus if you didn't already choose your folks and you didn't already talk about your ideas, what you want the group to bring. So 3 minutes, Zane will be waiting at the door to bring people up to the other room. And then in here, we're going to start at 0108. And here, we're going to start at 0108.
Not just yet.
All right, everybody else in the room, we are getting started with section 108. As a recap from last meeting, we were reviewing section 108 and section 110, and we came to consensus on 110, and then we moved back to 108, and we were saying, I think there's a lot of duplication here. Why is one orientation and one is training? Are they one and the same? We sent those to the Del Tech writers, and they created a new 110 that combines 108 and our previous 110 where we reached consensus. So I just wanted to very briefly scroll through 108 and 110 so you can see what the previous language was, and then we're going to take consensus on the revised, new, combined section 110. So really, we are knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone. If you look at your consensus queue, I know, woo! They're both actually listed as number 5 on our consensus queue, so we're hoping that with our new revised 110, we can actually just eliminate the old 108 and the old 110 and have a brand new clarified section. So the previous 108 was the program-based new staff. It began as orientation, and then during our discussion, we thought the feedback was, oh, this is the same as training. So you can see there that number 1, early learning providers must develop and deliver that training. We kept changing the word orientation to training, so we'll scroll through 108 just so you can have a refresh of what that was. Had the list of all of the different orientation topics, which the feedback was this is repetitive. Here's the previous 110 where consensus was reached by our large group. And we were trying to weave that language in from the orientation. And the Del Tech writers have done that for us. So this is what we're going to read and take consensus on, our combination of 108 and 110 for our new section 110, the program-based staff policies and training. So let me read. Number 1, an early learning provider must have and follow written policies for early learning program staff. Staff policies must include those listed in subsection 2 and 3 of this section and must be reviewed and approved by the department prior to issuing a provider's initial license. Providers must notify the department when substantial changes are made. Weight of 1. Number 2, early learning program staff policies must include, but are not limited to, A, all of the information in the parent or guardian handbook except fees, B, keeping staff records current in the electronic workforce registry, C, job descriptions, compensation schedule, and benefits, D, professional development expectation and plans, E, expectations for attendance and conduct, F, early learning program staff responsibilities for child supervision requirements, including preventing children's access to unlicensed space, child growth and development, developmentally appropriate curriculum, teacher-child interactions, child protection, guidance, and discipline techniques, safe sleep practices, if applicable, food service practices, off-site field trips, transporting children, health, safety, and sanitation procedures, medication management procedures, medical emergencies, fire, disaster, evacuation, and emergency preparedness plans, mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse, neglect, and exploitation per RCW 264420 and RCW 264430 and all other reporting requirements, implementation of child's individual health care or special needs plan, following non-smoking, vaping, alcohol, and drug regulations, overnight care if applicable, religious equity and cultural responsiveness, non-discrimination, plan daily activities and routines. G, staff responsibilities if the family home licensee, center director, assistant director, or program supervisor is absent from the early learning program. H, a plan that includes how both administrative and child care taking duties are met when a job requires such dual responsibilities. And I, observation, evaluation, and feedback policies pursuant to WAC 170, 300, 461, which that was the new one that we added and reviewed briefly yesterday. All of that is weighted NA. Number 3, an early learning provider must have and follow written policies requiring staff working, transitioning, or covering breaks with the same classroom or group of children to share applicable information with each other on a daily basis regarding A, a child's needs, allergies, and medication, B, any change in a child's daily schedule, C, significant educational or developmental information, D, any communication from the family, and E, information to be shared with the family. Looks like a weight of 5. 4, an early learning provider must develop, deliver, and document the delivery of early learning staff training specific to the early learning program premises. A, training topics must include those listed in subsection 5 of this section, Providers must be trained prior to working with children. B, training must be updated with changes in program policies and state or federal regulations. Weight of 5. Number 5, training topics must include but are not limited to staff policies and retrained as policies are updated or changed, listed in subsection 2 and 3 of this section, and chapter 43 to 15 of the RCW, chapters 170, 300, the foundational quality standards for early learning programs, and 176, background checks of the WAC. C, curriculum philosophy. D, child active supervision. E, planned daily activities and routines. F, developmental screening when applicable. G, positive behavior management. H, child abuse and neglect prevention, detection, and reporting policies and procedures. I, health and safety policies and procedures. J, contagious disease recognition and prevention. K, prevention of exposure to blood and bodily fluids. L, emergency preparedness procedures. M, special health and developmental needs of the individual child. N, safe sleep practices when licensed to care for infants or toddlers. O, personnel policies when applicable. That's okay. P, equity and cultural responsiveness. Q, non-discrimination policies. And R, age and developmentally appropriate practices. Okay. So we'll go back up to the top and we will look one by one. Yes.
I just have a question. Is there some significance to all of these highlighted ones?
So I'm going to defer that to our tech writers. Tyler, is there a significance to the highlighted portions?
Let me get this going. All right, so subsection 5 has a big chunk of highlighted portions. Obviously, you're not there right now, but let's start at the bottom. So that chunk right there is an area that we identified that can be removed because it's covered elsewhere through our duplication crosswalk. So that's a big chunk of text that we can just cut, which should make everybody happy. The other parts of highlighted text are areas where we looked at language that is similar throughout the rest of the chapter to see if there's duplication. And for the most part, we created a document called duplication crosswalk, and we say, yay or nay, this was a true duplication or it was not. Most of that is not. And if we use the reference the duplication crosswalk, we can sort of see the analysis of that.
Okay, so it sounds like the yellow highlighting is where there was thought to be duplication, but it is not. And the highlighted in red in subsection 5 was a duplication, so that language can be removed.
Correct.
Okay, question.
Would you go up to number 3, please?
Sure. I think we have a question on number 3, and then we'll go back up. Is there a question on 3? Okay, so we want to scroll back up to 1? Okay, so we'll scroll back up to 1. Oh, so that's number 2. Let's look at number 1 first. So number 1, let's take consensus on the language of number 1. I'm going to look around the room. We'll start with licensors. They are ready. So licensors, I see all 5s. From family home, I am seeing a couple of 4s, but I can come back to them. Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s. Parents, I am seeing 5s and 4s. From centers, I am seeing 5s. Family home, I am seeing 4s and a 3. Or a question? All right.
Do we have I think we do, but I just want to be sure. Is someplace a timeline for how long it takes for licensing to approve the paperwork? We do, right? We do, right?
I think Kathy's question is, if you make a substantial change and submit it to Dell, is there a timeline that you can expect to get a response?
That needs to go on the implementation because that would be something that might be addressed in policy or training for licensors. It wouldn't be addressed in WAC. But yes, it should be addressed.
And then we would like to remove on C a compensation schedule because that's a very individual.
Oh, let's
plan.
finish one first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get there.
Okay, so we got that concern. We're going to finish one. I was looking at this table and I saw 4s and a 3. Was that your concern, or is there another concern to document?
I'm sorry, but I'm also a little bit confused. So in order to get our initial license, we must be approved prior to the initial license. And I know we have a timeline for that. And then it says providers must notify the department when substantial changes are made. So therefore, we don't have to wait to hear back from them, or there's no timeline regarding that. Just when the substantial changes are made, and then we don't need to hear back from the department. That's my reading of that.
I would agree. And if the department had a problem with some substantial change you made, if it conflicted or something, it would be on us to let you know.
All right, so it sounds like we have consensus on 1. Were there any concerns that you wanted to document since you had a 3? All right, so we have consensus on 1. We're making progress. Moving to number 2, we did hear some feedback from Family Home about concern over C, wanting to remove compensation schedule. I can recall from last meeting the idea of the schedule was how often people are getting paid, not who's getting paid what, as some clarification. Is that resolved the concern? Okay, so that was my understanding, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But that really was just, when are you getting paid? Let's take, we can put an implementation. So let's put our note there for our intention, noting that the intention there is when people are getting paid. So we're just going to include a note there clarifying that that is when people are getting paid and not defining the language in the WAC. And we will use our microphone so that everyone can hear. All right, we are going to take consensus on number 2. And we will slowly scroll down so you can see all of 2 because it's kind of long. Oh, that's 5. And you do have this in the printed copy on your table. Can you use your microphone, please?
It seems like adding training on the foundational quality standards for early learning could go up into 2, and then everything else could be removed here.
Okay, so the proposal is that we would take 5B and add it to number 2 and eliminate 5. Is that the proposal?
Yes.
Okay. Do teams need a moment to consider that? Licensing?
I'm seeing 2 as being just what the policies are.
Okay.
And 5 is what has to be trained to, and while they're similar, they're not identical. And so I would hate to split them out.
Okay.
I mean, I would hate to pull them together. We've already kind of pulled them together by combining 108 with 110.
Okay. from other teams? I'm seeing a nod from parents. Head Start ECAP or centers? Okay, so it sounds like we want to keep 2 as it is. Okay, since they're speaking to 2 slightly different topics, so we'll scroll back up to 2. And we'll take consensus on 2. Oh, is there a comment?
On I, not the little I under F, actual I, we would like pursuant to WAC 17300-046 taken out since we haven't agreed to that WAC yet. Everything in this section is pursuant to other WACs, and so we don't understand why that one's there and the rest of them aren't, especially since that's a brand new WAC that was written this weekend that we haven't agreed to yet.
Okay. Other teams? We can take consensus on 2, A through H, and I can be set aside since we've not reached consensus on that.
I would propose that we do that for now. I'm not comfortable removing it.
Okay. So we'll take consensus on 2, A through H. So we won't take consensus on I because we've not reached consensus on that new proposed section. Does that meet the need? I think we have a comment.
We're not saying remove I, just the pursuant to part.
Okay.
Because everything in this section is pursuant to another WAC, and so we don't understand why this one is specifically called out and the rest aren't, and especially since it's the new WAC that we haven't seen really yet. So we just want the pursuant to. We agree observation, evaluation, feedback policy should be there, just the pursuant to is the part
so
that we
just
have
take
issue
the
with.
reference out.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's take consensus on 2, A through I, but on I we're removing the reference.
So it's funny because we actually have constantly wanted to put references in. And so I guess what I would propose is that we agree on everything and then have a caveat saying, if in fact this group approves 0461, then this is automatically approved. If not, then we can revisit it or something. I'm not quite sure why we would not want a reference when we've begged for references in every other section.
And I would agree because I suspect what may end up happening is more references will be added in order for clarity.
Okay. All right, so we'll make a note on that reference that pending what we decide on 461, the reference will or will not be included. But we still want to take consensus on 2, and we're going to take consensus on the intent of I because I'm hearing that the observation, evaluation, and feedback is important. So we're going to take consensus on 2 having said that. So from parents, I am seeing a 4 and the rest are 5s. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s. From Family Home, I am seeing 4s and a 3. From centers, I am seeing 3s all the way around the table. And from licensing, I am seeing 5s all the way around the table. So let's hear from our 3s. We'll go Family Home and then to centers.
Just feel like if your policies are approved at licensing and you're submitting them, your policies must follow the WAC, that number 5 should be included here so that we can eliminate how thick our book of WAC is.
All right, documented. And from centers?
Ours is just the same concern of the pursuant to a WAC that we haven't really reviewed yet.
All right, so we'll let Lori capture those concerns. And then we will move to number 3. All right, number 3. So this is having those written policies regarding those transitions and covering breaks between classrooms, so that consistent communication and care. So let's take consensus on the language of 3. So from Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s. From licensing, I see 5s. From parents, I am seeing 5s. From centers, okay, centers would like 1 minute to discuss. So I'm going to put 1 minute on the clock. All right, that was 1 minute. Centers, do you need any additional time? All right. So we're taking consensus from centers. I am seeing 5s from centers, and family home would like 1 additional minute. Okay, so that was your 1 minute. Do you need any additional time? Family home, do you need additional time? Okay, so 1 additional minute. Okay, that was the 1 minute. Team caucus, family home, are we ready to take consensus? All right, so we're measuring consensus from family home on number 3. So around the table, I am seeing 4s and 2 3s. So let's document our concerns on the 3s.
I'm concerned about the covering breaks in family childcare. For me to cover breaks, I have to send children home to remain legal.
Okay. Okay. So there's concern about covering breaks. Is there any other groups that wanted to share their concerns? All right, so we have consensus on number 3. We're going to look at number 4. This is about developing, and documenting that staff training. And the training topics are listed in subsection 5. We are taking consensus on the language of number 4. All right, so I'm going to call for consensus on 4. From centers, I am seeing 5s around the table. From licensing, I see 5s. From parents, I'm seeing 5s around the table. Head Start ECAP, I see 5s. And from family home, I am seeing 4s and a 3. All right, so we have consensus on number 4, and let's document our concern. Okay, so we have all 4s, no concerns there. All right, so let's move to number 5. Again, that language that is highlighted in pink can be removed. Is that something? Yes, licensing.
For clarity, licensing would suggest it not be, except for safe sleep practices, which is duplicated above. But we also, even though we're not negotiating weights, we would recommend that this have a weight of NA.
Okay.
I think we can all just agree to NA.
Do we have consensus on a weight of NA for this one? I'm looking around the room. I see consensus there. Okay? So we will make our note there that the weight for this one should be NA. The proposal has been to leave that language in just for the clarity's sake, but to remove the safe sleep practices as it seems duplicative. Okay? So we'll make that edit and we will take consensus on 5. Do we need to scroll through 5 as it's long, or are we ready? All right, let's take consensus on number 5. So I'm looking at centers and I am seeing 5s around the table. From licensing, I see all 5s. From
So
go
are we voting on this with the removal of C through W or whatever, or with?
The proposal was to leave that in
Okay.
for clarity,
All right,
but to
gotcha,
remove
sorry.
the safe sleep. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s. From Family Home, I am seeing 4s and 1 5. And from parents, I am seeing 1 5 and the rest are 3s. So let's document our concerns for our 3s.
So we just are concerned about removing that, even though it is duplicative. If it is, we just think that the safe sleep should be mentioned there as well. That's really important to us, and so we just would like it there.
All right. So Lori is documenting that concern. Oh, any additional?
Sorry, I forgot to mention one thing. And because it's weighted in A, it doesn't really matter that it's mentioned again. We're just re-emphasizing our point.
Yeah, that it's the value. All right. Great. So Lori's capturing that on our screen. And I believe that is the whole section. Yes.
So do we now have to propose that we delete 108 since we combined it? Because if so, I make that proposal.
Yes. Yes, the original 108 and the original 110 would be deleted with the passage of this new 110. That's the understanding. So this, it's called 1010, but it's the combination of 108 and the previous 110. Yes, so if you look at your crosswalk, as we've reached consensus on the new 10 in our consensus queue, we have reached consensus then on 108 and 110, so we can cross out those 2 birds with 1 stone. Great job, you guys. We're making some progress. All right, so if you look at that consensus queue, We are shifting gears just a little bit, and we are going to move to section 305. This is an interactions and curriculum section. This is the curriculum philosophy and planning. We reached consensus on subsections 1 through 3 already, so we really are only looking at subsection 4. So as we move to 305 in your packets or your computers, we are going to focus on subsection 4. And I'm going to put 110 on our thermometer. Okay. So scrolling down to subsection 4, this was our curriculum, philosophy, and planning. Subsection 4 reads, curriculum and activity plans must be available for department review. This is a weight of 1. So I move that we take consensus on subsection 4. So this is 305, subsection 4. All right, so I'm looking at centers, and I am seeing 5s from the centers team. From licensing, I am seeing all 5s. From parents, I am seeing all 5s. From Head Start ECAP, I see all 5s. And from Family Home, I'm seeing a 2 and 1 5. FIST, and a 3, and a 2. Okay, let's document those concerns and see if we can work towards resolution.
I think if we could just remove that whole thing. No. We would be happy. Curriculum, philosophy, and activity should be able to be evaluated when the licensor attends. They will see what's happening. There's routines on this. There has to be routines already listed. There has to be all of these different things in philosophy. They will know if you're following it. We do not want more requirements of having written things available for review.
Okay.
Your plans must be available for review.
Okay, so any response?
I'm not sure we're going to come to consensus on this, and I would recommend we table it and move forward.
Okay. All right. From other team leads? Are team leads okay tabling this one and moving on? Okay, let's hear another recommendation.
Could we say curriculum and activity plans must be available for review or observation?
Do teams need a minute to consider or respond? Okay, I'm seeing centers.
We just have a clarifying question to the department. What exactly will you be looking for when you're looking for curriculum and activity plans? What exactly will the licensor be looking for when they're on site? Maybe that'll be helpful to answer Family Home's issue.
We would be looking to see that they have a plan. So yes, that includes the activity schedule, but it also includes, okay, this week we're doing worms, and these are the basic activities. We're, this storybook, this activity, whatever. We're not looking for huge detail, but we want to know that there is a plan in place and that it was implemented. And we want to see the historic. So that's why we want to be able to review them.
Okay. All right, so does parents have a comment?
I do have a comment. When the teachers are taking their hour planning time during their curriculum, isn't this kind of the same thing? So we would already have that, that would already be in place because they have, I'm looking at the wrong person, I'm sorry. So because they already have that, that's already in place, so that would be something simple to get to, for lack of better words.
We
I
would think that out of that planning time would come this document that we could review. And they would need to keep it.
So it's been proposed that we table this one. Family Home, is there anything we can do to address your concerns? Would a sidebar conversation be helpful, or should it be tabled?
I just want to quickly clarify that family childcare does not get an any hours planning time. There's no, that's a center thing.
We would also just go back to the foundational health and safety requirements of this process, and to know that Dell licensors may not be qualified to review and approve child development standards. I mean, what is their educational background? That is really not, we don't want more paperwork, more storage requirement, more things accessible at the time. This seems way overreaching.
Okay. So we had the proposal to table it. We have documented that we have consensus on this language from 4 of our 5 groups. I think we've heard the concerns of Family Home. So to move on and be respectful of our time, we'll move to our next section. And this one will be tabled if we have time at the end to address. All right. So the next section that we are going to move to is 335. This is also interactions and curriculum. And we are looking at the whole section. So section 335. And it says that we are going to review this one with 490 in mind. So I'm going to read section 335, which is physical restraint. Then how about I read 490, which is the child restraint policy, so that we can have both in mind. Then we'll go back and we'll take consensus on 335. That way we get a fuller picture of what is going on. So we're reading 335 currently. This is physical restraint. So number 1, an early learning provider must have written physical restraint protocols pursuant to WAC 170, 300, 490, and implement such protocols only when appropriate and after complying with all requirements of WAC 300, 330, and 331. 2, physical restraint must only be used if a child's safety or the safety of others is threatened, and must be A, limited to holding a child as gently as possible to accomplish restraint, B, limited to the minimum amount of time necessary to control the situation, and then we had clarified language from the Deltec writers for C, developmentally appropriate, and D, only performed by early learning providers trained in a restraint technique pursuant to WAC 170, 300, 106, 10. Number 3, no person may use bonds, ties, blankets, straps, car seats, high chairs, activity saucers, or heavy weights, including, I should say, an adult sitting on a child to physically restrain children. 4, licensees, center directors, assistant directors, program supervisors, lead teachers, or trained staff must remove him or herself from a situation if they sense a loss of their own self-control or concern for the child when using a restraint technique if another early learning provider is present. If an early learning provider observes another staff using inappropriate restraint techniques, this staff must intervene. 5, if physical restraint is used, a licensee, center director, assistant director, program supervisor, or lead teacher must A, report the use of physical restraint to the child's parent or guardian as soon as possible, but not later than the release of the child at the end of the day, and to the department within 24 hours pursuant to WAC 170, 300, 475. B, assess any incident of physical restraint to determine if the decision to use physical restraint and its application were appropriate. And C, document the incident in the child's file, including the date, time, early learning program staff involved, duration, and what happened before, during, and after the child was restrained. And D, develop a written safety plan with input from the child's primary care or mental health provider, parents or guardians, and a department licensor to address underlying issues and reduce the need for further physical restraint if physical restraint has been used more than once and a safety plan is not already part of a child's individual care plan. So let's keep that in mind. We're going to move to 490 so we can read the physical restraint policy, and then we'll come back and take consensus.
Can we also read that training, the training WAC that is referenced here?
After, it would have to be after we go through this. After we go through this, we could. So number 1, in section 490, so this is the child restraint policy. It says 1, an early learning provider must have and follow a child restraint policy that contains behavior management and practices pursuant to section WAC 170, 300, 335, which we just read. A restraint policy must be appropriate for a child's developmental levels, abilities, language skills, and culture, directly related to the child's behavior, and designed to be consistent, fair, and positive. 2, family home licensees, directors, assistant directors, program supervisors, lead teachers, and other appropriate staff members must be trained annually in the child restraint policy. And 3, only trained staff may restrain a child in care in accordance with section 170, 300, 335. So section 335 is what we just read. And this is section 490. Licensing. Go back to 335 or go up to 1? All right, we're putting 2 minutes on the clock for Team Caucus. Do you have a question?
Can we have a question?
Sure.
While we're caucusing, after the caucus, can we have the Dell definition of physical restraint read or on the screen, just so that we all know, or if it's available during, to put on the screen?
So we're going to put 2 minutes on the clock. While those 2 minutes are up, we're going to find that definition of physical restraint. So that was the 2 minutes. The definition of physical restraint is on the screen. That was our 2-minute team caucus. Do any teams need additional time? Okay, we have a question from Centers.
So the definition of this, we just want to make sure that, let's say we're out at recess and one of our toddlers doesn't want to come inside because they're having fun, and we pick them up to bring them inside with us, that would not be considered physical restraint, correct? We just want to make sure that in those situations, we're not having to report every time we pick a child up or move them from here to there, that it's not going to be considered physical restraint. Because with this interpretation, it could be interpreted that way.
It would not be considered physical restraint when it's a normal part of child development. It's when that child crosses a line and you're needing to contain them.
Okay. So let's go back to section 335.
So
Unless there's an additional question.
So we're up on number 2 on 335, I think. And so one of the things that it says is that physical restraint must be developmentally and culturally appropriate. We're in 335. So here's our question. What is that? We are, of course, very supportive of all things culturally appropriate, and we certainly, the consensus of this group is that the safety plan would be really culturally responsive, but we're talking about situations in which there's danger to another child or this child, and so I guess my question is, what does that mean culturally appropriate?
So it looks like the Dell proposed language actually removed that phrase.
Keep going. Oh, it's in 490?
Oh, in 490.
Okay, sorry. I'm getting confused with all these things.
So can we look at 335 first?
So
and
is
take
this
consensus?
language different than the one that I have on my screen? Because the one that I have on my screen has culturally appropriate. Okay. Okay. Okay, gotcha. All right. Okay, so as long as it's not in there, I think it is still in 490. So that's our question.
Can we address 335 first so that we're not like bouncing back and forth? All right. So we're going to keep that in mind, the culturally appropriate, when we get to section 490, knowing it's not in this section here. So let's look at, we're at 335 currently. We're going to look at number 1, having reviewed section 490, and we are going to call for consensus on the language of number 1. So we're at 335, and we're going to call for consensus on subsection 1. So looking at Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s from parents. I see 5s around the table. From Family Home, I am seeing 4s, all 4s. From Licensing, I see 5s, and from Centers, I see 5s. All right, so let's look at number 2. This is just the language, and we're looking at that language in the box there also. So we're going to call for consensus on number 2. So looking at Head Start ECAP, I see 5s around the table. From Family Home, I am seeing, can you move your 2s and 3s and 4s. From Parents, I'll come back to Parents. From Licensing, I see 5s. From Centers, I'm seeing 3s. From Parents, I am seeing 3s and 5. All right, so we do have consensus blocked because we had a 2. So let's document our concerns. We can move around the room.
where is the training that is for family child cares that is pursuant to WAC 0106, Section 10?
Is your question, where does it exist in the WAC? Or like, who has created it?
Our concern is that there is training available, but not for providers. So we need to know if that providers are going to be able to be trained on this, and is it going to be a cost to providers? Because I have no problem taking the training, but right now it's not available to providers. It's available to ECAP and Head Start, but not to family home providers.
Okay. Licensing in response?
If you go back to 0106, number 10, it talks about completing child restraint training as approved or offered by Dell prior to being authorized. So we've addressed this previously, that any training that we're saying you have to have has to be available.
Okay.
So it is an implementation concern that we are aware of.
Okay. After hearing that response, does that change any of the consensus level? Okay. But we did have a 2 from your table. Because we can't hear.
Does this training exist right now, like maybe at school districts or something?
Sorry, I was waiting for Mike to come on. It does exist. There are community providers that provide this, and there are individuals who can get trained. So I do believe it. I mean, it is an access issue. I wouldn't disagree with that. But say, for instance, if you were in Snohomish County, we have a trainer that somebody could contract with to do the training who is certified in right response. So it does exist, because all the youth homeless youth providers have to have the same restraint training. So it's just hard to get. So I would definitely say make a note. This is not easily accessible.
Okay. So it sounds like we are capturing that on our parking lot implementation. We've captured it during our discussion of training. Okay, so we'll retake consensus from Family Home with all of that information in mind. And I am seeing 3s and 4s. So we do have consensus on number 2. Are there other concerns that we want to document? We can clap first and then Yay! That was good, yeah. But let's document those additional concerns.
Pursuant to what Dell has clarified is what's considered physical restraint and what's considered normal developmentally appropriate actions, is I would like that put in the parking lot, that there needs to be some kind of clarification. So if we're holding a child's hand to help them calm down, that's not considered restraint. Or we're picking up a toddler from the playground and carrying them indoors, that's not considered restraint. So I would like that in the parking lot.
All right, perfect. We're documenting it there, and then over to centers.
I think our concern was mostly with the training as well, just the accessibility of it, the cost of it, and then the fact that it's an annual training that, you know, if it's something that has to be done by a provider, you know, a new provider that's starting, if it's hard to access training, we can't predict when a situation like this is going to come up in a classroom. And so, especially being from a more rural area where trainings aren't always available and we have to send our staff 2 hours away to trainings, like, this is just a concern that it needs to be accessible for and cost effective, you know, that we can't afford, you know, really expensive trainings for every staff member that we have. So that's our main concern.
Thank you. All right, so we've documented those concerns. We have consensus on 2, so let's look at number 3, which you can see in the corner of the screen here. And we are taking consensus on the language of 3. Oh, do we have another concern? Yeah. Okay, let's go back to number 2. Thank you for flagging me down.
So our concern is the same as accessibility. Also with safety on who does these trainings. we're looking at the safety of the staff and also equally as important, the safety of that student.
Thank you. All right, so Lori's capturing that concern. Thank you. And if I miss something, please just like shout out and beat me down. It's hard to, this is a big room. All right, let's look at number 3. What a person may not use when physically restraining a child. Let's take consensus on number 3. So I'm looking at family home, and I am seeing 5s around the table. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s around the table. From parents, I am seeing 5s around the table. From licensing, 5s around the table. And centers, 5s around the table. So we have consensus on number 3. And a 3, thank you. Let's document that concern.
My 3 actually has nothing to do with language, but it has to do with what we're not doing right now, which is weights.
Okay.
And I just wanted to be on record that an NA for this one, unless it's covered somewhere else, is not okay with me.
Okay, thank you.
It is weighted in 331, just for the record. We had the same concern, so we looked for it.
Is it too late to talk about concerns?
No, we can document another concern.
So on number 3, I think that tying a child into their high chair so they won't fall out in order to eat lunch is considerably different than sitting on a child in the living room or whatever. I don't know. I'm not sure that they should be in the same. Yes, they're called restraints on a high chair. There are child restraints, and you use them for the child's safety. They're also called child restraints in the car seat when you strap a kid in. So I don't know. I don't know about that.
Licensing?
I would respond that we're not talking about seatbelting a child in to keep them from falling out. When we're talking child restraint, we're talking about using it as a method to control a child. And I mean, the number of times that we've walked in and found toddlers sitting in high chairs in front of the TV because the provider didn't want to be chasing after them right now. Not because the child was eating, not because they wanted to keep them from climbing out while they're eating, but they were being restrained for the ease of, that's what we're talking about here. We are
Right.
not talking about the normal use of, or the intended use of something. We're talking about going over the intended use.
So I totally agree with you, and I even understand that that is what your intent is. However, that's not what the words say. And my idea is that the words should reflect the intent.
So we'll capture that concern over the intent. All right. So Lori's capturing that concern. She already did. Oh, she's so on it. So let's look at number 4. So I'm going to give you a moment to read number 4, and we're going to take consensus on number 4. All right, let's call for consensus on number 4. So from Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s around the table. From Family Home, I'm seeing 5s all the way around the table. From Parents, I'm seeing 5s around the table. From Licensing, I am seeing a 3, and the rest are 5s. And from Centers, I see 5s. So we have consensus here, and we want to document our concern.
My concern is just in the way it's written. I know this isn't the intent, but the way it's written, it makes it sound like if you're the only provider, it's still okay to physically restrain a child if you have a sense of loss of your self-control. So I just wish that it were reworded to state if you have a sense of your own loss of your self-control, that you should not be restraining a child, or something like that.
All right, so we'll document that we want our tech writers to take another look at that for clear language. All right, so Lori's documenting that concern. All right, and as she documents that concern, we're going to move to number 5. So you can review that on your screen or on the screen here, and then we will take consensus on number 5. All right, so looking at number 5, and I think we'll look at this quickly and then scroll to the next page because I think there is another. Oops. So there's A, B, C, and then D is on the following page. Yes.
We would like this to be any staff, because if the assistant teacher is left alone, they shouldn't have to tell the lead teacher to pass it on.
Okay, so the proposal is to change the licensee, et cetera, to any early learning provider. Okay? Trained staff. Okay. Use your mic.
Because what they're saying is that I don't think it should say trained, because the whole question here is, I mean, we've had this conversation about assistant teachers being left in the room, right? And they are not one of these people, but they should still have to. They should still have to report if something happens. Anytime something happens, it should be reported.
So your proposal is that it says an early learning
If
provider?
physical restraint is used, staff must. That's what we would say, yes.
Okay. All right. So let's take consensus, making that change from delineating all of those roles to just saying the staff. And we are taking consensus on the language of 5. Oh, you need 1 minute, Team Caucus? All right, centers would like 1 minute on the clock.
I'll put on some ears.
Okay, that was the 1 minute that the centers team requested, and they're requesting an additional minute to discuss. So that was the additional minute that the centers team requested. Are we ready to come together? Or do you need additional time? Centers, do you need additional time? Okay.
I think we're ready.
So we're coming back together. It sounds like the centers have a comment.
Okay, so in subsection D,
Okay.
we would like to change a word possibly.
Okay. So we'll scroll to D. Okay.
So where it says develop a written safety plan from the child's primary care or mental health provider, parent, or guardian, we would like it to say or a department licensor. Because we feel like if we're working with the parents and the healthcare provider, we don't feel like we would need input from the department. We would have the plan available to be reviewed by the department, but we don't know that the licensor would need to give input on every safety plan we're putting into place. And do they really have time to give input on every safety plan that may need to be put into place? So, or change it to, they're available to be reviewed by the department licensor.
Okay.
So
the proposal is to change and to or. I'm gonna look at the licensing team to see if they have a response.
We would propose that it be and reviewed by a department licensor.
Okay.
So we don't have to be part of the input, but we could review it and then say,
how about
Well-
available to be reviewed, or do you want us to send it to you to review?
Would you like to sidebar for a minute to discuss? Yeah. Okay, so licensing and centers are going to sidebar for 1 minute to come up with their proposed language. Does our sidebar need additional time? Okay. So we'll put another 1 minute. All right. We are coming back together. Do we have proposed language from that sidebar?
Yes, change to develop the written safety plan and notify the department licensor of the safety plan instead of review.
Okay, so we have changed 5D, that we are writing the safety plan with the input from those caregivers, the parent or guardian, and notifying the department when that plan has been developed. All right. Let's take consensus on number 5. So looking at licensing, I am seeing 5s and 4s at that table. From centers, I am seeing 5s. From parents, I am seeing 5s. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s around the table. And from Family Home, I am seeing 4s across the board. So we have consensus there, and we are documenting that change in writing. We have reached consensus on section 335. Give yourselves a round of applause. And I want to apologize that I made you work through your 10-minute break. So take your 10-minute break now. So we'll come back together at 10:36.
right? As with implemented by contractors, there's set topics, but there's non-set model. But in photography coaching, the defined model is all coaches go through about 12 to 18 months certification in that model. And teachers, we thought in that process for teachers to get started through that coaching because it's so reliable and valuable. It didn't go anywhere. Joke that you don't remember is an absolute. We're trying so Oh yeah. And I heard that ECAP contractors or somebody's going through this new model out of Chicago to help live, lead, explore. I'm not invited, but CCA is going. Live. But it's an instructional leader coaching model. So right, it's a coach that does coaching for somebody identified on site as the coach as the leader to do the instructional qual QI coaching through the site. So again, coaching in a reliable and valid model that is PD. I don't think it's going to be easily transferable to childcare because of just the resource it takes to make that successful. Which I think it takes a well-resourced site with lots of support at the management level, which tends to be true of construction cap and more well-resourced sites. I think the general chapter site doesn't have that infrastructure in place to do that right now. And there are some, of course, the well-resourced the sites that have a lot of city, like in our region, City of Seattle, like that's actually a model that we could use and really bandwidth, which is expensive and part-time sites who need more one-to-one classroom support. Period. Yeah, really nice to streamline it. Figure it out. I agree. And many of your sites are getting it twice. Or 3 times. Yeah. Support. Yeah. Physical practices. 4 years. Why isn't that aligned? Why is there an open thing happening into that? Well, then I'm not. My coaches are coming in and doing hours on something else. I spend more time
So they don't favor like so we had many things satellite connection, so we had things sent it out over and waiting. Got bad news. Now we're back again. This whole thing is holding up for childcare buses. So finally we were able to start saving for it.
All right, that's the end of break. While we get started again, I'll just let you know where we're starting again, and that is on 0490, child restraint policy. 0490 child restraint policy. Oh. Okay, so again, we're doing 0490. And Hallie already read this one to you, so we'll just do recaps as we go. Yes, Judy, do you want to say something?
Yes, we would like to, in number 1, we would like to add an early learning provider must have and follow. It to be consistent with other policies along the way.
So you want to add, so it was stricken, so you want to unstrike the and follow. Okay. There was also another consistency check about culturally appropriate, if we could find that, if we could scroll down. Is that right? Oh, it's at the top. Can you say 1A, appropriate for each child's developmental level, abilities, language, skills, so we just strike and culture to be consistent with the one previous that we just approved. Licensing.
The other concern we kind of have, we think the intent is that 1AI, that it be children's developmental levels rather than each child. It makes it sound like you have to have one for each child. Well, you don't if you're not restraining them. So we're thinking that needs to be tweaked just a little bit in terms of wordsmithing.
Okay, so that's an easy one. Appropriate for each children's developmental level. For children's developmental level. Yes, that makes a lot more sense grammatically. Thank you. Okay, so I'm not going to read number 1 again to you, but I'll actually see if we can measure consensus on number 1, the whole thing. Licensing, all 5. Okay. Head Start ECAP, all 5s. Family home providers, 3 4s and 1 5. So we're waiting on parents and centers. Do you want an official team caucus? Oh, I see no. No, you don't need a team caucus. Are you ready to vote? Okay, let's see it. Thank you. All 5s from parents. Centers? Centers are all 3s, so we'll hear from centers.
So our concern is just over the general definition of the physical restraint and the implementation behind it, because we want to make sure that it's consistent across the state and that providers aren't being dinged for small things like, if you grab a child's hand to help lead them inside or pick them up off the playground, that every licensor across the state will know that that's not actual physical restraint. So we just want to make sure that that definition is cleaned up and that the implementation piece for Dell, that's very clear that what restraint is and isn't.
So we actually have that on the parking lot already, guidance on examples of restraint. And I specifically wrote that example of holding a child's hand, so it applies for both. And then, of course, Lori's putting it on the screen too. Okay, let's move to number 2 then. Number 2. So this is that staff members must be trained annually in the child restraint policy. We'll measure consensus on number 2. Licensing, all 5s. Head Start ECAP, all 5s. Family home,
So this is an internal training. So family home licensees would give it to our own selves.
Okay, 1 minute caucus on the clock.
Policy, which is a site-specific policy. So this one's just on policy. We already voted on it. We already came consensus on that in the last section. It's almost like a review of the policy, like we have to do every year the X number of times we get everybody has to review the mandated reporting. That's how I interpreted this, but perhaps I'm wrong. Because it's just like, yep, we reviewed the mandated reporting, we reviewed the whatever, we reviewed the whatever.
Okay, family homes are ready. They called the team caucus. Parents, you look like you're still discussing. Do you want more time? Okay, we'll add 1 more minute on the clock. So I think we're back from team caucus and parents have a question/suggestion.
So when we were reading this, we just wanted to confirm or maybe clarify if directors is supposed to be center directors or if it's just directors in general. Because previously, I think in each one of them generally says center director, we think. I don't know, it might be.
We can leave that as a note to the Delta coordinators if that's helpful, unless someone wants to respond right now. Okay, so Lori, if you could add that note to check to see if that needs to say center director specifically. Centers.
On the trained annually in the child restraint policy. We're agreeable to this if our interpretation is correct, that what this means is that you revisit your policy and that you don't need to have each person go through the full training annually, which may be hard to get to and costly, etc.
So we heard that question already from Family Home, we heard it from centers, I heard it from parents. Could we add in a word here that just clarifies annually in the program's child restraint policy? Because it's specific to your program's policy as opposed to the outside organization providing child restraint. Or program or providers, child restraint programs. So Lori, if you could add the possessive, the apostrophe S, I think that would clarify it more. And then they can write, the child Del Tech writers can change it if we need to. Okay, any other comments? All right, I'm gonna measure consensus on number 2. Okay, well, Head Start, all 5s, family home providers, 1 5 and 4 4s, parents, centers, we'll go to U5, all 5s, licensing, you gave me all 5s earlier, thank you. So just waiting on the parents. I got you, centers, you can put your hand down. All right, parents, all 4s. Great. Number 3, only trained staff may restrain a child in childcare in accordance with the WAC that you just passed. So number 3, I'll measure consensus on number 3. Licensing, all 5, centers, all 5s, Head Start, ECAT, all 5s, parents, all 5s, family home providers, 1 5 3 4 4s. Is that it? That's it. Nice job. Really, this is on pace. Thanks so much for the hard work here. All right. What's next? Expulsion. So this is 0340 expulsions, and we're actually going to suggest moving up 0486, which is also about expulsions, but in program admin, to review those side by side. So I'll tell you those numbers again. 0340, expulsions in interactions and curriculum. And the second one we'll compare that to is 0486, which is expulsions in program admin. 0340 and 0486.
So we'll do similarly to last time. We'll read all of expulsion, section 340, and then we'll read all of the expulsion policy so that you can have both in mind, and then we'll come back and take consensus on this section. So we're going to start with 0340 expulsion. So number 1, we have some clarified language from the Del Tech writers there that says 1, to promote consistent care and maximize opportunities for child development and learning, an early learning provider must develop and follow expulsion policies and practices pursuant to WAC 170, 300, 486. That is not weighted, and we'll read that policy section momentarily. Number 2, I'm reading the language in the box provided by Dell. An early learning provider may expel a child only if the child exhibits persistent behavior that presents a serious safety concern for that child or others, and the program is not able to reduce or eliminate the safety concern through reasonable modifications. Number 3, also language provided by Dell. If a child is expelled, the early learning provider must A, review the program's expulsion policy with the parent or guardian of the child. B, provide a record to that parent or guardian about the expulsion and the steps that were taken to avoid expulsion. The record must include the date, time, early learning program staff involved, and details of each incident that led to the expulsion. C, provide information to the parent or guardian, the child. I'm imagining that says of the child, the parent or guardian of the child. This information must include, but is not limited to, community-based resources that may benefit the child. And D, maintain a copy of the expulsion record in the child's file. So that was the previous language. And 4, which is also language provided by Dell Tech writers, 4, the early learning provider must report to the department when children are expelled. The information must include A, child demographic data, including but not limited to the age, race, ethnicity, and gender of child. B, the reason the child was expelled. And C, the resources that were provided to the parent or guardian of the child. Okay, so that was section 340. Now let's move to section 0486, the expulsion policy, so that we can have this in mind as we take consensus. So expulsion policy, section 486. Number 1, an early learning provider must have and follow an expulsion policy pursuant to WAC 170-300-340. Number 2, an expulsion policy must provide examples of behavior that could lead to expulsion from the early learning program. B, detail steps the provider takes to avoid expelling a child, including but not limited to environmental and staffing changes. C, detail how the provider communicates to the parents or guardians of the child the steps taken under subsection 2B of this section. And D, include information that may benefit an expelled child, including but not limited to community-based resources. Okay, and that is the expulsion policy section. So let's move back to section 340. We're going to focus on that section first. So section 340. Yes.
So we have a comment and a concern. We agree with having a policy and following protocol. However, we need to have the opportunity or the ability to consolidate that down to a you're done today if it is a significant safety concern where you cannot have that child back. For instance, a child brings a weapon to school or uses or injures someone else. You cannot play around with it. If it's something that you know you just simply cannot repeat, you have to be able to do that day of.
Okay. Do you have proposed language around that, or is there feedback from the room of how that could be incorporated? So I'm seeing a hand from Head Start and a hand from Family Home.
Go ahead. Wouldn't you just be able to write that in your policies?
It does say persistent, perhaps if we remove that.
Can you clarify where persistent is found? In 2A. Oh, so a child exhibits behavior? Is that what you're recommending? That presents a serious safety concern for that child or others. So
Right.
removing the word persistent. Okay.
We could live with that because we don't think there's anything in this that prohibits a truly dangerous child from being done today.
Okay.
But we do believe the intent here is that as much as possible, we're going to try not to do that.
Great. So let's scroll back up to 1 with that understanding. So let's take consensus on 1, the language of 1. So, question? Yes. So the removal of the word persistent was in subsection 2. So we're taking consensus on 1 first, and then we'll move down to 2. All right, so consensus on 1. From Family Home, I am seeing 4s from Family Home. From Head Start, I am seeing 3s and 3 5s. From parents, I am seeing 4s all around the table. From licensing, I see 5s, and I can't tell if that's a 4 and a 4, thank you. And then from centers, I am seeing 5s and a 4. All right, so let's document our concerns from our 3s.
We just think that the way number 1 is worded, we all of a sudden have this really strengths-based approach to the WAC, and it feels really out of line with the other way the other WACs are written that begin with "you must have this and do it." So it's odd. It's not enough to block, but it's weird. And for consistent sake, we'd prefer this not be so strengths-based, or they all be so strengths-based.
All right. So Lori's documenting that concern. All right, let's look at number 2. And in number 2, we removed that word persistent. So it's just if the child exhibits behavior that causes that concern, serious safety concern. So we're looking at the language for 2. Let's take consensus on the language of 2. From centers, I am seeing 5s around the table. From licensing, on number 2, I'm seeing 5s around the table. From parents, do you need additional time to think? I'm seeing 3, 3s and 4s. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing also 3s and 4s. And from Family Home, I am seeing all 4s and 1 3. All right, so we have consensus there, but we want to document our concerns from those 3s. So let's go this way around the room. Do you have any concerns to document?
Want to be sure that someplace it's documented the difference between the termination of a child and the expulsion of a child. That's my concern here.
Okay.
I could see, for example, a family child care provider telling a parent, your kid cannot come here anymore because you owe me 2 months tuition, and then the parent reporting my kid was expelled. That's what my concern is.
Okay. Right.
Our concern is with the removal of the word persistent. I totally agree with what Hillary was saying, but there are a lot of toddler rooms who you bite, you're out, it's immediate safety, and our concern is the impact, the negative impact on families, and especially through a racial equity lens, the negative impact on young, especially boys of color, who often exhibit what are severe behaviors, and there's no effort to continue to work with them. This reads as a one and done, and we've got real big concerns with it.
Okay. And so from parents? Oh, we have another concern from Head Start.
Is it on? Okay. I think I raised this issue before, that I just feel there are not adequate resources and support for providers in this particular area, and that many of the early learning programs do not provide adequate training as part of the ECE certification curriculum piece. So I just really want to put this on the parking lot, that we really, really need additional resource, consultation, and support around this.
So we're documenting that in our notes here and also on our parking lot list. All right, and from parents?
So our concern was the same one that was just raised before this other person, were like, you were right inside my head. Just worried about when you remove that word persistent and what that'll look like, and if it could be any and everything, and yeah, just echoing what was already said. Thank you, kudos.
Thank you. All right, were there any other concerns that we wanted to document? All right, so let's move to number 3. So number 3 are the steps that must be taken if a child is expelled. All right, let's take consensus on number 3. So from licensing, I am seeing 5s. From Family Home, are you ready to take consensus? I see some hands. From Family Home, I'm seeing 3s and 4s. From Head Start ECAP, I'm seeing 5s. And from Centers, I see a pinwheel. So let's take that.
Sorry. In keeping with what we just spoke about with persistent, the concern is provide the steps that were taken to avoid expulsion. Yes, that makes sense in all circumstances except where you have a child where you have to take immediate steps to expel them. Okay, so can we remove steps that were taken, or can we say avoid steps that were taken to avoid expulsion, if any?
So from licensing, I saw a hand up, and then we'll come to Head Start.
I would just say that in that instance, you could document why you didn't have steps you took first, because the behavior was so, yeah.
And I think you could have in your policy, each program in your policy, like these are automatic disqualifiers, so there will be no steps. And then you've reviewed that, and that's the why. So I don't think we need to call it out in this.
All right. So is that a pinwheel for a comment? Okay. Okay. So I think we were coming around the room, taking consensus, and we came to Centers. So I'm seeing 3s all around the table. All right, so we want to document those concerns, and then we also had a comment from parents. So we'll go parents, and then we'll document our concerns.
Lori?
Yes.
On C, where it says provide information to the parent or the guardian, do you want to add the word of in there? And that's it.
Thank you. All right, let's document our concerns. Let's go this way around the room. Centers?
Concern was there may or may not be community-based resources available depending on where you are.
Were there any other concerns that we want to document? Moving this way. Family home? Oh, parents? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in I'm sorry. You are included. All right, let's take consensus from the parents. That's my apologies, that's my fault. All right, I am seeing 4s all around the table from parents. Thank you, and thank you for letting me know. And then we had our concerns from Family Home.
Mine is along the lines of the previous section we did and what Centers have stated, is that, and we've discussed this before, is that those community-based resources that there has been a recommendation in the past that Dell provide that list so that when we give out those resources, it is not being misconstrued that we are doing a diagnosis of any kind.
Okay. All right. Were there any other concerns to document? All right. All right, scrolling to number 4. This is about reporting to the department information after a child has been expelled. So we will take consensus on the language. So from licensing, I am seeing 5s. From parents, I am seeing 5s around the table. From Head Start ECAP, I am seeing 5s around the table. From Family Home, I am seeing 4s and 1 3. And from Centers, I see another pinwheel.
So we're seeing a note here that said Dell was going to research the implementations of the privacy laws with the demographic data, and we're just wondering if that has come back yet.
So we direct that back to our back table of our Dell experts. There was a request for information regarding privacy laws and if reporting demographic data is a violation of those, specifically about children. Implementation
Can
of
you
Dell.
move that note so I can read the rest of 4? Okay, I can look into that. Yeah, I won't provide more of an answer right now, but I will look into that specifically for age, race, ethnicity, and gender of a child.
And being really clear, the intent is there's no individual identifier attached to this at all. It's just data for the sake of collecting data, because it's really important we start collecting that data.
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Great.
There would be no personally identifiable
No, none,
information.
zero.
Okay. Centers, do you need a moment to think through that? All right, let's put 1 minute on the clock for a team caucus. All right, that was 1 minute. Centers, do you need additional time? How many? All right, 30 more seconds for the centers to have a team caucus. All right, that was the additional 30 seconds for the team caucus for centers. Do you need additional time? Okay, so we've taken consensus around the room and we're coming to centers. So centers, I'm seeing 3s across your table. So we do have consensus on number 4 and we're going to document our concerns. I like the cheering. So we had concerns though from centers and then also family home if they wanted to express those.
The concern that we have relating to gathering this data too is on a provider by provider basis, it may not be meaningful data and it may be subject to interpretation that may not be accurate. For instance, if you have a predominantly, it depends on the race and ethnicity of the children that you serve, right? So if you predominantly have Caucasian kids, those are going to be the ones expelled. If you predominantly have other ethnicities, those are going to be represented in who you're expelling, right? So I think that's a concern to be aware of when you're looking at this data and how it's aggregated and how it is interpreted.
Can I just say that from an implementation note as well, the intent is not to track this at a center-based level, but to track it at a cumulative state level. So once you submit it, the implementation assumption that I'm making is that it would go into a database and it would not stay linked to you or your center or even your zip code. It would be to look at the whole as a state. From a policy lens, we get requests all the time, and nobody is tracking this data well, and it's really hard to advocate for change to our system without this data. So it would not stay linked to you and your center or you and your home at all, but would roll into a cumulative total, so we as the state can tell a good story.
Does, but by virtue of you talking to your licensor, that is tracked?
An implementation. All right, well, we've noted the
Okay.
concern, and that can be a further discussion, maybe offline. I know that we had a concern from Family Home that we wanted to document.
Just wanted to make sure that my concern that was noted my concern that was noted before about community resources is reiterated.
Okay, great. All right, we've documented those concerns. All right, and let's scroll down. Yes.
Could we say, on that one that we were just looking at, could we say the early learning provider must make an anonymous report to the department? And does that relieve those issues?
Can we capture in the intent bubble that the intent here is that this data is not linked to your specific program, and that's not how it's being tracked? Let's capture that in an intent, because we do have consensus on the language, so that it's a macro level view. All right. I just want to make sure when we scroll. All right, let's scroll to the bottom and make sure that that was it on that section. Big round of applause, you guys. We're making progress. All right.
I'll stay on. We are going to 0486. So Hallie already read this one, but we'll go back to it because they're parallel or they're similar. It's expulsion related to program admin as opposed to interactions and curriculum. Okay, so number one, an early learning provider must have and follow a expulsion policy pursuant to what we just passed. So measure consensus on number one. All right, licensing, all fives. Head Start ECAP, all fives. We're just doing number one. Family homes, parent. So licensing, Head Start ECAP, I got you guys, thank you. Do you all need a team caucus? Oh, we moved it up from the queue so that since there are similar topics. Parents, all five. So we're just waiting on family, home, and center. Oh, great. Family, home, 2 5s and 3 4s, and centers, all fives. Awesome. Number two. This outlines what your expulsion policy must have, so examples of behaviors, detailed steps, how the provider will communicate to parents, and other information that may benefit expelled child. So yes, comment from centers.
So with the weight on, we would like the weight removed from this one. We know we're not really addressing waste today, but this is one of those instances where one says we have to follow all the steps, and this is just detailing what those steps are. So just like we've done before, we would like the weight removed from this number two.
Okay, I see a yes from licensing, so I'll make that note. Let's start with the language. Let's measure consensus on the language of number two. Measure the consensus on the language of number two. 30-second team caucus on the clock. Family home, looks like you need more time. We'll put another 30 seconds on the clock. Licensing, family home would like a sidebar. Are you okay with that? Okay, I'm gonna put, once you guys, after travel time, we'll start the clock. We'll do a 1-minute team sidebar. Family homes, do you have a comment or should we measure consensus? Okay, yep.
We would like to add to the parking lot for this that if a provider does not expel children, and it is their philosophy not to expel children no matter what, that expulsion policy does not need to have examples or anything like that. It can just say, we do not expel children.
Okay, with that, I'll measure consensus on 2, just the language. Measuring consensus on 2, just the language. Licensing, 5s. Parents, 5s. Head Start ECAP, 5s. Family homes, 5s and 3 4s. Centers, 5s and 1 4. Okay, so I didn't see any 3s. So now I'm going to measure consensus on changing the weight from 6 to NA. Licensing, 5s. Centers. I would assume it was your suggestion, so. Yep, okay. Parents. Head Start ECAP. 5s, family home 5s, so we'll go back to parents. 5s and 2 4s. Great. We'll move, oh, nice job, look at that. Okay, the next one we will do is 0, 3, 4, 5, supervising children. Okay, so we're on 0345, supervising children. This was sent to Dell typewriters. The definition for active supervision to be included. Okay, so we have the definition. It's not on the screen, but we have some printouts. It's actually proposed definition from licensing. So while we pass this out, do you want to explain what they're about to see? Oh, thank you. We can also pass them out, and Lori will bring it up on the screen.
So Dell Licensing kept hearing the concerns around supervision, and we shared many of the same concerns. What we came up with was a proposal that we define supervision one way and active supervision as a heightened level. And so supervising children, you must be able to see or hear the children that you are responsible for at all times. You need to use your knowledge of children. I mean, it's very, very similar to what we already had, but the big change is you must be able to see or hear children at all times. And then you must reassess and adjust your supervision as activities change or situations change. Active supervision we see as being within sight and hearing, and there are very defined times within the supervision WAC that would apply, but we thought that it would help, especially in the family home environment, but generally speaking all across the board. We recognize that this means that before the end of March, we're going to need to go back and look at every place supervision is used in the WAC. We are proposing that for today that we look at these definitions and decide if we can live with them for the supervision WAC and anything we're doing from here forward, and that we worry about going back and identifying whether it's active or regular supervision in the other parts of the WAC between now and March.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is read what's on the screen in just a second. I want to let you know that we have all of the definitions, including this, printed. We also will send it to you afterwards. So anyone who needs it, we have a few copies.
So the clarification of the packet that I'm handing out, this is all of the definitions that had been flagged throughout our negotiations to be discussed, but supervision and active supervision is on page 1. So if you're flipping through this, you might see other things that you want to discuss, but right now our focus is on page 1.
Oh, okay, so Lori is reminding us that that has been sent to you. Another document that was sent to you is this very long table of every time supervision has, it shows up in the WAC. So Dell typewriters have already identified where this would need to be replaced. So you have both of those items. Yes.
A 2-minute caucus so that we can talk with our people that just came back in the room? Just to kind of, so that we're not being distracted by trying to figure out what went on, because we all want to know.
That's it. Okay, because we haven't fully delved into here, let's take the 2-minute team caucus to hear from your groups, but also to gather all the documents you need to get ready for this conversation. else, do any of the teams need more time to debrief from the TA resolution? Okay, so I see a yes. I'll put 2 more minutes on the clock. Okay, 2 more minutes on the clock.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to give a quick debrief of our first round of TA negotiation work as it related to section 0270, subsection 5, and 0291, which is, the latter of which is overall safe sleep practices, and 0270, subsection 5 is relating to overnight care. So as you can see here, we captured many different comments on subsection 5. This was ultimately tabled. We could not come to consensus on it. There are, again, several different comments. All the groups have their own perspectives here, and they have been captured. But overall, there is a specific issue with subsection 5 in that it, particularly for family homes, where there are several providers throughout the state where they may be the sole provider in that program, and they are unable to remain awake 24/7 if they provide 24/7 care to provide waking supervision of the children that are asleep at nighttime during overnight care. Several different comments. These will be distributed. I'm not going to walk through all of them. Again, we were not able to come to consensus. I do not know if anybody wants to quickly chime in on additional commentary about this section before I jump into the weights of the safe sleep section 0291. Hillary?
I think our biggest concern is that we feel that infants and toddlers are going to be safer in licensed care than perhaps they even are at their own homes, and certainly if they are in unlicensed or unlawful care. So we're very, very concerned that if we do not provide an option for overnight care that allows a sole family home provider to sleep, that is not, it doesn't mean that the care is going to go away. It is just going to be moved to much less safe environments.
A fear of driving to unlicensed care. And there was also rich discussion about the data that were presented to the group as well. Lori, I'm going to move on to 0291 overall with 0291 specifically is about infant and toddler safe sleep practices. We were just looking at the weights, and we were not able to come to consensus on these either due to different perspectives. Each one has its own unique issues and perspectives, but this is another issue where the language, not necessarily wrong, but the weights did not match up, align best with what every group felt. Does anybody want to make any kind of commentary on what happened regarding this one? Okay. Oh, Marie?
Really, really hard topic, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to celebrate that we have a very low infant mortality rate in childcare in Washington State. I think that that is a great thing to celebrate by comparison to other states. The work that we've done, the education that we have, the safe sleep practices that are implemented, the support in making a plan to licensing. We have done an amazing job, and I just think that that should be acknowledged. Yeah, in our room, we had a comparison, or some statistics from Florida that were just very scary. They are required to stay awake all through the night, and they had 125 deaths in 2015. We had 2 last year, so that's pretty amazing. So just, we have a lot to celebrate that we are doing an amazing job. And this is a really hard subject, and I think we all want to come to something that works. It's got to work so that it works in licensed care. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you for the group. Okay, so we have about 22 minutes before lunch, and I think we have some great ones up ahead that we can make some great progress on. So right now I'd like to ask for a TA resolution group to go out with Zane on 0255 pest control. Parents are already up there, so family home's up there. Zane's on his way. We're waiting for centers. I think licensing, you already sent your folks. Head Start ECAP, we're just, okay, cool. So a small group was gonna do 0255. In the big group, we're gonna go back where we were. And where we were was that we're gonna read the new definitions of supervision and active supervision because they relate to 0345, and these are the proposed definitions. All right, we're going to finish up this facilitator caucus really quick. We'll just do 30 seconds before we get started. So, we're just making sure that everyone has a copy. I got some more copies. Does anyone want the printed one right now? All right, Hallie, can you let me?
I don't know how to share. I did not pass kindergarten. I did. I went to Mrs. Maxwell's preschool.
Okay, I'm gonna read up on the screen so you have it on the screen to follow along as well as some people in paper or on your computer. So supervise or supervision. When supervising children, an early learning provider must be able to see or hear the children they're responsible for at all times. Early learning providers must use their knowledge of each child's development and behavior to anticipate what may occur to prevent unsafe or unhealthy events or conduct, or to intervene in such circumstances as soon as possible. Early learning providers must also reposition themselves or the children to be aware of where children are and what they're doing at all times. An early learning provider must reassess and adjust their supervision each time child care activities change. C, active supervision for a heightened standard of care. Okay, so we'll move into active supervision, or actively supervised, quote unquote. Refers to a heightened standard of care to see and hear children at all times. Early learning providers must use their knowledge of each child's development and behavior to anticipate what may occur, to prevent unsafe or unhealthy events or conduct, or to intervene in such circumstances as soon as possible. Early learning providers must also reposition themselves or the children to be aware of where children are and what they're doing at all times. An early learning provider must reassess and adjust their supervision each time child care activities change. Any comments, questions, or concerns?
So,
Go ahead. So we'll do HESCAP, licensing, and family home.
I just have one question, which is that the WAC also has multiple references about supervision of staff. And so we're just asking the question if that's self-evident, what they mean by supervision of staff, or whether or not that needs a sort of a context definition as well.
So, two things. One is in response to what Katie just asked. That is something the Dell team also has identified, and we're wondering if we can't use the word oversight or something else, and we would address that probably in March, as in a suggestion. But also, my second thing is under actively supervise instead of as soon as possible to intervene, we had changed that to immediately. Because we think with active supervision, it would be immediate, not as soon as possible.
Okay, so the first suggestion, after Laura, you're done with that, could we add a comment that we need to consider when it's talking about staff supervision, that the word oversight is used as opposed to supervision? Family home providers.
I just want to know that the plan from Dell Licensing about where we're going to review the WACs and never place the word active supervision or supervision is used, that we're going to review that. And is that noted somewhere? Is that in a schedule somewhere? Is that in a queue?
Just so you know, that was one of the things that the Dell team at least is intending on going through and trying to get out prior to the March meeting so that you can see what we would think. And then maybe we can all come kind of prepared with, yeah, that makes sense, no, it doesn't, whatever.
And if, as a follow-up, if we do not get to that in March, or for some reason that's delayed, are your suggestions about those revisions going to be submitted?
I am hoping that we as a team will get our suggestions out to all of you so that you can comment, and even if we don't get to it in March, maybe we will have come to some kind of agreement that we would then make sure got forwarded.
As the same system we're going to do with weights?
Yes.
Similar to that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are we waiting for all suggestions around that until March on this supervision, active supervision?
I'll follow up on that question in just a second. Let me show you guys what's on the screen to give you a better sense of what it is. This is what Dell Tech Writers did between last month and this month. You should have gotten it in the team leads got this on Thursday, so someone on your team should have this document. They basically went through the entire WAC and looked up every time supervision or active supervision popped up. Or actively supervised.
Directly supervise, it's at the bottom.
Directly, you can see in the column exactly what they searched for and what came up. So there's very many variations of what supervise has shown up throughout the WAC. So they already reviewed all of these instances, cited the WAC, the weight, and recommendation about what definition should be used for that specific spot. Does that help answer, Nicole, what you were getting at?
Around the immediately that we did in the past, and so it was just a suggestion, but I didn't know
So-
if you wanted to wait for all suggestions until March.
No, because we're actually proposing that the Dell team is proposing that these definitions now be used as
Okay.
we're addressing
Oh, I see.
0345.
When we were talking about removing infants from sleepers, we used immediately unless putting another child at risk. Could we do immediately unless putting another child at risk here? Immediately intervene unless putting another child at risk.
Okay, so Lori, let's go back to the definition.
We're thinking about, there are situations where you can't split yourself into two.
So this is specific to active supervision or actively supervised. Is that right? Okay. So your suggestion is after immediately?
Unless putting another child, I don't remember what the exact phrase was, either like direct harm or risk or something like that. I mean, whatever language was used there, we all agreed on it, so it's something that I feel like the room felt good about.
So I think that's a direct suggestion right now, Lori, as opposed to a comment.
That is, so Judy said that I should make the suggestion now because we're going to be using this language now,
Moving
so
forward.
yes.
So, okay, so I guess we can make the note, but also maybe add it into the language next after Lori's done with the note. Okay, so this suggestion, I'll read it to you. Early learning providers must use their knowledge of each child's development and behavior to anticipate what may occur to prevent unsafe or unhealthy events or conduct, or to intervene in such circumstances immediately unless
Putting another child at risk. Is that right, Rachel? Is that what we? If not putting another child at risk.
So instead of unless, if not.
Yes.
Do teams need parents?
So we just wanted a little clarification. Are we going through to approve the language on active supervision and supervision, and then going to go forth and use that later?
Yes. So not only are we going to go forth and use that later immediately in 0345, but also knowing that that would affect that whole table that has all of the instances of active supervision and supervision. So with that question and that clarification, do you need a team caucus to review this new language that centers have proposed? Okay, I don't see anyone feeling strongly about that. With that, I will ask for measuring consensus on just supervise. Let's do active supervision first, so we just made changes to that one. I'm measuring consensus on actively supervise or active supervision. Language as is on the screen. Measuring consensus on actively supervised or active supervision. Okay, licensing all fives, centers, all fives, parents, all fives, Head Start ECAP, fives, family home providers, all fours. All right, let's move up to supervise or supervision. I'll measure consensus on supervise or supervision. Licensing, all fives. Centers, fives. Parents, fives. Head Start ECAP, fives. Family home, fours and 1 5. All right, that is going to be our new definition for supervise or supervision and actively supervise and active supervision. So we have that now. You also have this chart to review, so if there's anything that comes up for you, we can flag that for March. Awesome, so now we can actually properly move into 0345. So we're on 0345, supervising children. All right, 0345. Okay. All right, I'm going to read this as we haven't done that yet. Number 1, an early learning provider must not allow any person other than a child's parent or guardian to have unsupervised access to child and care. Does anyone need a team caucus, or are you ready to go? I haven't read it yet, but I hear a lot of chatter, so if you're not ready, let me know. 2-minute team caucus on the clock. Okay, so that was 1.5 minutes. Parents, do you need more time? Yes. All right, we'll give more time for parents to team caucus. We're done with team caucus, and licensing has a comment.
Before people expend tons and tons of time in kind of reframing this, after we read through it, Dell has already got some proposals that would be really good for them to have that information rather than recreating the wheel three times.
Specific to 0345 or?
Specific to 0345 as we go through it. At places where we would take out actively supervised to supervise and
Okay, so to save time, I think that licensing and Lori will work together to go ahead and enter that in. So before we break for lunch, just a few minutes early, I'll give you an update. We had about 2.5 hours this morning of negotiation time, and you did about 3 per hour. So remember, your fastest pace is 2.5. So you've increased your speed, so that's an amazing job. And of course, there were the 2 that were discussed out into your resolution. So great job, and enjoy lunch.